All right, Berto, emails, what do you say?
Let's do it.
This is the Psychology in Seattle podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Kirk Honda. I'm a therapist and a professor. Who are you, Humberto Castañeda?
My name is Humberto Castañeda, and I disprove cloud shapes for people.
So listener Lily from the UK, she says, my boyfriend's idea of an ideal relationship is one where we are monogamous. But every once in a while, he wants to invite others to the bedroom with us. I am vehemently opposed to that, although I've been at varying levels of willingness previously, which has caused him to push the idea of me sleeping with other men while he's not there, and he wants me to film it and show him later. We are long distance, and he says he doesn't feel this desire as much when we are together. So just chiming in here, she's saying, my boyfriend wants to have a monogamous relationship, so he's not polyamorous, but he has a kink, if you will, of wanting her to have sex with other men, either with him there or not there, and that turns him on. And she doesn't want to do that. She's vehemently opposed, but in the past, she has been at varying levels of willingness. It sounds like verbally possibly open to it, like maybe she has said like, oh, well, I don't know, maybe, and they haven't actually done that, but she now or always knew that she has no desire to do that and is, completely against how she would like to live her life. Berto, what do you think of this so far?
I think that from that starting position, it's really tough to imagine that it could work in a balanced way. Maybe it could, but it just seems like if I put myself in her shoes and I'm the person who doesn't really want to do it, but I kind of go along with it, I might start to resent them and then maybe,
right. It's not like if my wife and I are trying to decide whether or not we're going to have Italian or Mexican for dinner.
Right.
And I really want Italian and she wants Mexican and I go along with her. This isn't like that, right? This is, no. If you go along with it, it's a major action, right?
Yeah.
And it can, as you say, put it in a really resentful place. So going on with the email, it's caused arguments so severe that it has caused us to stop seeing each other. He hadn't brought this up since we became official until his best friend, by the way, I want to get back to something that Lily said in the beginning, that they're long distance and that he says that he doesn't feel this desire as much when they are together and, yeah. If she travels to him or what do you think about that?
Well, that is interesting. Usually, so do I think that it's unusual that you would feel differently when you're together versus not? Of course not. No, I definitely could imagine, but I would have imagined it the other way around. Like, for example, the guy says, well, when we're apart, I feel like I want to go have other relationships, but I don't feel that way when I'm with you. But in this case, it sounds like what the guy's saying, and I don't know if it's both, but what I'm hearing is when we're apart, I want you to have these relationships with other men and like film it or something. But when we're together, I don't feel that.
Right.
Which is interesting, but I'm not surprised that there's a difference in that, but I am surprised in the direction that difference goes. I also think that there's some amount of likely some insecurity when they're apart, where he's feeling like, the relationship is threatened, and potentially the way to overcompensate for that is, well, have an affair on purpose. Like maybe I'm in control of the affair.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Going on. It's caused arguments so severe, it has caused us to stop seeing each other at times. He hadn't brought this up since we became official until his best friend, a female who he has already slept with, which I am comfortable with that past, the best friend of his suggested a foursome with her boyfriend. I told him it's a complete no, and if he brings it up ever again, our relationship is over. Chiming in here, I'm guessing that why she would really be rigid about that and give that ultimatum is because he badgers her. If this was the first time he had ever suggested it, I don't think, given the context of the broader email, that she would have said, I can't believe you asked me that, and if you ever bring it up again, I'm breaking up. I think it's because she knows that if she allows for any door ajar, he will try to get through.
Yeah.
So she has to be extremely firm with it, which
Kind of like with your food analogy, it's more like I have an allergy to Mexican food, and every time you're always suggesting Mexican food.
Yeah.
And it's now 10 years, and I'm like, dude, are you trying to kill me?
Right.
The next time you ask if it's Mexican, I'm out.
right. Going on. I'm traumatized from all the pushing in previous months. And to be honest, this has also provoked antagonistic feelings toward his best friend. He's given me lots of reassurance now, saying he values our relationship much more and that this is a tiny thing to him. I'm worried, despite my now firm boundary, he will either bring it up again and push me, citing the fact that I did seem willing to do it in the past like he has done before, or I'm worried that he'll just cheat and leave me. I feel like I'm in a constant state of waiting for him to tell me he wants to sleep with someone else, which is my worst nightmare. Several people have told me that he will act on this curiosity and desire sooner or later, whether I like it or not, as he has never done it before. I don't understand that. Whether or not as he has never done it before. Anyway, I think what she's saying is people have said the fact that he is asking and he's so adamant about this is a recipe for disaster. If you don't do this for him, he's eventually going to start cheating. And just chiming in on that, what do you think about that, Berto?
I don't want to throw fuel on the fire, but it's possible that he's already feeling guilty about something, which is potentially why he's pushing so hard for her to do something with someone else.
Yeah, I thought about that too, and there's no indication of that.
It's no proof.
It's a possibility, but it's also completely possible that he, I think for people, they would have a hard time understanding, wait, so he wants her to have sex? There must be some angle there. He must be working some Machiavellian plan that he wants to really have sex with women, so he's trying to get her to have sex with men.
But it could just be a kink.
Right, it could just be a kink. Yeah. People have that kink.
I will say also, like, I don't know, I've never been in a committed long distance relationship, other than when I was like 14 and I had a long distance phone relationship. But anyways, my point is that it must be really hard. It must be really hard.
Yeah.
And so maybe this is all legit and just trying to make the thing work. But I'm not saying that it's legit to keep badgering and putting pressure and things like that.
Yeah. And the last bit of the email says, I have no idea how to feel about any of this, and despite loving him and knowing he loves me, I'm wondering if this is just an indication that the end is in sight. End of email. So the key issue that I'm hearing is that he's pushing you to do something that you don't want to do. And that pushing you was initially maybe done in good faith because you were open to it at first, or didn't feel like you could be assertive at first. But since you've been assertive and said that you don't, not only do you not want to do it, but you don't want to hear about it anymore, his pushing is extremely hurtful. If we could be talking about anything, like we could be talking about what sort of food to eat at night, or what side of the bed to sleep on, or do you put the glasses in the cupboard up right side up or upside down? It doesn't really matter what we're talking about. It just feels discounting. It is a repetition of something that you keep asking to not happen, and he keeps doing it anyway. So it can feel like, can I trust that when I draw a boundary or when I ask for something and I'm very adamant about it, that he even cares or remembers or anything? And I've treated couples like this, that it can get really weird toward the end of this process or down the road of this process, because some people can have boundaries that are, from the outside, it can look very strange that the person is so adamant about it.
Right.
We have the example of the Italian versus Mexican food. I've seen couples where it does go down that road, and eventually from the outside, it's like, why are you fighting about that? It's so silly. And why are you so ultimatum-y about this topic, about what sort of restaurant? But when you actually go back through the history, it's not about the restaurant or the choice or what they're asking. It's just the fact that the individual has been pushing back and has had to resort to such an ultimatum because it's no longer about that issue anymore. It's about whether or not their partner can listen to them at all, you know?
Like you could have seen this, for example, between me and my wife many years ago, where from the outside, you might have seen an argument where I get home with an expensive shirt, maybe expensive shirt and shoes, maybe expensive shirt, shoes, and belt, maybe expensive shirt, shoes, belt, and a pants, and a jacket, whatever. The point is I get home with expensive stuff. And if you're just watching that exchange and all of a sudden she's very upset and seems like at the edge of something, you're like, well, I mean, yeah, he bought some clothes, but I mean, why are you so upset? But if you don't watch the progression of like repeatedly being like, why are you spending all our money? Why are you not? And me being dismissing and all that stuff. So it is hard to see that the progression is what led us to this point.
Right. And that's why it's important, if you are on the outside, that you take the time to listen. But also, if you're on the inside, that it is framed as such. Like with your wife in a scenario like that, if the whole conversation was about you spending, then that would only be a small slice of the pie. The real thing that's happening is a concern about boundaries, about limits, about honesty, about trust, about the long-term viability of the family finances, about whether or not you care about her feelings. And those topics are understandably very upsetting for everyone concerned, whereas a lot of couples will only talk about the clothes or only talk about whether or not he wants to have a threesome or foursome, instead of the way it makes me feel when you keep asking me this. Okay, aside from that, obviously it can be very sexually harmful, or it can feel sexually harmful. I don't know if Lily is feeling that way, but it can feel objectifying, right?
Right.
To feel like your partner doesn't really care what's in your heart and mind. They only just want to use your body in a certain way. You know, it can feel very objectifying that way.
And like this imposition of, wait, like, so even though I don't want to, like, I have to have sex with someone else? Like,
Right. Why would you want me to do this now? If I said yes to this badgering, you would know that I would only be doing it because I'm trying to avoid a fight, and you would want to move forward with that? Like, what's going on?
Like, take the relationship out of the picture for a second. Just imagine the person's single, and a friend of theirs is like, hey, you should have sex with my buddy over here. Oh, I don't want to. Thank you. No, you should have sex with my buddy over here. Well, I don't want to. No, you should have sex with my buddy over and over and over and over and over. I don't want to.
Right. Yeah. It's a red flag of some. Yeah. Now, he could have some kind of compulsion, and it might not be a part of a larger lack of empathy. We're not hearing anything regarding a general lack of empathy. It sounds like what she's saying is outside of this, their relationship is great.
Right.
So I want to be clear that there's nothing wrong with him wanting this. It's sometimes called a cuckold fetish, or just a fetish for threesomes or foursomes or orgies or whatever. And there's nothing wrong with him wanting this, fantasizing about it, asking for it. There is something terribly wrong and completely dickish about being pushy and pressuring her and not dealing with his shit, you know? I would say that if he has some massive drive to have this experience, there's something else going on with him.
Yeah.
Because I would imagine for a lot of couples, you know, you have to give up some sexual fantasies or desires, you know, or boxes that you like to check every once in a while. And when you commit to a relationship, even in polyamorous relationships, there's a chance that there are things that you always wanted to do or wanted as a part of your regular sexual life that, you know, isn't possible given other people's preferences or given the scenario. And if you can't fucking deal with that, then something's going on there.
Yeah.
Don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely. It's there's the surface level of, I don't know, this sounds cool, you should do it. But there's the under level of what is the need that's really needed here? Like, what is the hole that we're trying to fill, so to speak?
Right.
Yeah.
You know, we have general needs for sexual gratification, most of us. and for intimacy and variety and
Right.
being turned on. And and it's possible that this is a very strong orientation, if you will, for him, which leads me to another point of there's a fair amount of people, I believe, who develop or are born on some. All of us, I would say, develop or are born somewhere on the spectrum between monogamy and non-monogamy, and we have a lot of people that are forced to be in a monogamous lifestyle and world who would be much happier and more fulfilled and less busted up and less prone to cheating or pressuring their partner to do stuff if society allowed for that flexibility. And we're seeing more and more of that, particularly in places like Seattle. So one of the questions I would explore with him is that orientation, because in my belief, and it's hard to know this exactly, I would say that there are two dials, if you will. There's the dial of where are you between 1 and 10 between monogamy and non-monogamy, and then the other dial is how flexible are you? Because for some people, they might be completely on the monogamous end of the spectrum, but they're cool with trying new things and occasionally dipping their toes in the water of polyamory or giving it a shot for a few years. It's not going against the grain for them. Similar to other kinds of orientations, if we're talking about heterosexuality and homosexuality, for some people that are, and it's hard to scientifically lock this down, but you can imagine people being on, or at least the narrative that they have is that they are very much one or the other.
Right.
And for some people, that they are like, absolutely never can I break from that. And other people are like, yeah, I mean, I don't mind messing around with people. I'm not going to enjoy it that much, but I'm okay. It's fun. Just try something. So where is he on that? Is he stuck in a monogamous world, which if so, that doesn't mean that he needs to break up with you or anything, but it would help to provide a foundation for everything that's happening. Because if that is a viable narrative, then it would explain something, right?
Yeah.
And then the other question is like, how flexible is he? And if he is extremely inflexible regarding this kink or desire, why? And can his dial regarding the flexibility be adjusted? Is there some kind of sublimation that he can do? Like, this isn't commonly something that can be satisfying to people, but maybe you, Lily, engage with him in fantasy. Like maybe you could tell him while you're having sex about stories of past partners, or you can make up a scenario in your mind. There's a lot of sexual gratification and really great needs that people have that can absolutely be 80, 90% met. And for some people, only met through fantasy, because if you actually did it, it wouldn't be enjoyed. You know what I mean?
Oh, actually, so this is great. She could even use AI, like an AI voice, but it sounds, like a dude. So she records. You can kind of only see her body, but you hear this dude, and it seems like stuff is happening, whatever. But it's you could go to a whole number of extents to make the simulation be a thing.
Now, only if you're up for it, Lily. Do not do any of these sublimations or substitutions if you do not want to do it. And so obviously therapy might be able to help, but given your description, he's being a complete dick about it. It's one thing to ask. It's one thing to like really want this sort of thing. It's another thing to just be unrelentingly pressuring about it. I mean, my God, dude, like grow the fuck up or figure your shit out.
Read.
Go to therapy. This is a you problem, pal, not her.
Yeah.
All right, let's take a break. We can get back. More emails. What do you say?
Let's do it.
All right, we're back from the break. This next email is from highest tier patron Jocelyn G. Good old Jocelyn G. She says, "Hi, Kirk and Berto. What songs accurately depict love to you? I was listening to Love is a Losing Game by Amy Winehouse and thought to myself, this isn't love. It's just a small fraction of it. Most love songs seem skewed towards the super happy or the super negative aspects of love, but not the balanced or realistic view of what it's actually like to have a healthy or balanced love. End of email, she writes. So, end of email. Pedo, what songs in the lyrics depict actual love in all of its glory and nuance and not just the black and white point of view? What songs?
When I'm 64.
Okay, how so?
I have a list, but When I'm 64 is this grand song about love because, yeah, usually you're talking about like, oh my gosh, I'm head over heels, or oh my gosh, my heart was broken, or oh my gosh, this is the perfect love, or oh my gosh, this is the worst love, right? When I'm 64 talks about this longevity aspect to love, what it would be like to live a life together and the trade-offs. There's a lot of trade-offs spoken about in the song. Yeah. All the things that happen as we age. And so I find it like this beautiful meditation on, will you really be with me this whole journey? There's a lot to do, some good, some bad, some hard, some
I like
easy.
It. I sang that song on my 21 run that my mom and dad took me on when I turned 21. They took me out for a drink at Busch Gardens, the Japanese restaurant in Chinatown, and there's a karaoke bar.
Oh, and you did that.
And I sang When I'm 64.
Oh my gosh, that's great.
You have a list though?
Yeah, I have others. Yes, for sure. So Billy Joel has a couple of very interesting ones. One of them is Just the Way You Are.
That's funny. That's on my runners up list.
Okay. Yeah. So this is a great song. Now it's too bad he doesn't play it anymore. He sort of disowned this song because he wrote it, I believe, about Christy Brinkley. And then, I guess they didn't end in a nice way or something. So, but the song is really great.
So he doesn't sing any of the songs that he wrote about Christy because he wrote all those songs.
This one in particular, he many years ago said that he was done with that song.
Okay. I mean,
now,
that says he's not phoning it in emotionally when he's performing.
Sure. But the sentiment is so great, right? So like the whole idea is don't go changing to try to please me. You never done that before. So it's talking about how the unconditional aspect of love. Like there's good things and there's bad things, but I love you just the way you are. So it's this other dimension. Now I will add an asterisk here. The listener is saying, this one Amy Winehouse song, it's just talking about this small fraction of. I don't think any one song can cover the gamut. That's impossible. Love is an infinite thing. But I like this song, and obviously When I'm 64, but I like this song because it doesn't just say, I'm head over heels, like the same thing. It talks about like, listen, you have imperfections, but that's okay. I still love you. I love you just the way you are.
Right.
Yeah.
What else is on your list?
Okay. So the another Billy Joel song, which is She's Always a Woman. This song is, again, what it's exploring is that it's not just saying, this person is perfect. I found
what are some of the lyrics from that song?
She can kill with a smile. She can wound with her eyes. She can ruin your faith with her casual lies. And she only reveals what she wants you to see. She hides like a child, but she's always a woman to me. So this is another song where he's talking about how she makes him feel and how he views her in this like great womanly complete way, but she's clearly rough around the edges. He's literally saying like, man, she's hard, like she's gonna almost kill you. So it's another great sentiment in my opinion, where it's not just saying like, again, I found the perfect love, I finally found all this. It's really saying like, this one is for me in this very nuanced and complicated way. So I really like that as well. Another song that I think is amazing is the Stevie Wonder, Isn't She Lovely? It's about his daughter, his baby. Yeah. And it's another, again, none of these songs cover the gamut, but it's another beautiful dimension of love. It's this like beautiful expression of like the sublime feelings he gets about this new little creature. And it's, it's obviously not romantic love. It's this familial love, but it's beautiful, and it is also a very energizing song. Like you hear and you're like, ah. And then also Stevie Wonder, which very cheesy, but I just called to say I love you. I love that song.
Yeah, I like it too. It came out when you and I were young and susceptible to top 40 music. I totally understand if people hate that song.
Sugary syrup for sure.
But I love that song.
But the thing I like about it, first of all, it is a clever construction. It talks about all these stages of the year, and yet it dismisses them as like, even Christmas is not important. The important thing is I'm calling to tell you that I love you. Right? So again, yet another dimension. This is the sentiment. It's simple, but it's pure. And it kind of speaks like there's a hidden story behind here. Because if the person is always with this person, the call is not necessary, right? If you live with this person, you see them every morning, the call is probably not that necessary. So what is the backstory? There's some separation happening here. Maybe they're having a long distance relation. Maybe the person's traveling a lot. Maybe they're apart because they broke up temporarily. We're not sure. But there is some implication that all said and done, I'm just calling you because I need to let you know that I love you. And so I like that. I like that dimension.
Yeah. Well, I'll give my runners up, and then I'll say the one that I think is the one.
And I have a couple more too.
Oh, well, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Well, okay, so Grow Old With Me, John Lennon.
How does that one go?
Grow old along with me, the best is yet to be. He's singing to Yoko, and he's just like singing this very heartfelt song. The recording is like really low quality, but it's beautiful. And what I like about that one is similar to When I'm 64. It's this thing about like, grow old with me implies way more than just like, oh my gosh, I met you at the club and we're so hot and stuff. It's like, be willing to put in the time. We're going to go through a whole bunch of changes here, but I'm going to enjoy that with you. And so it's another beautiful sentiment. And then the last one I was going to throw in there is, so of course the Michael Jackson's Human Nature, right? And it wasn't written by him. It's the guy
I watched. I actually recorded my own. I tried to record my own version of that song a while back, and it never felt right to me. It just, I'm not Michael Jackson, and Michael Jackson's little vocalizations that only he can do are like half the song apparently to me, because everything was technically right about the song. I recreated all the keyboard parts and the drum parts, and I sang it in tune, but it just was a pale, disgusting imitation of Michael Jackson's song. But yeah, recently, like last month, I watched a number of little documentaries about how that song was written and conceived. And
I think I've seen at least one or two of those.
Yeah, I won't bother you with the details, but it was it's an interesting story.
But it's the Toto guy. Wait, right? Yeah. Like, it's crazy. So anyways, but the reason why, how is this a love song? But I just love the sentiment of that song, because it is like this awareness that, look, we are flawed. And in the end, it's like a lot of our behaviors can be explained by this fact that we're just humans.
Yeah.
And I find that like another dimension of self-love. It's in the same vein as like the greatest love of all, in a way, where it's like, we have to be patient with ourselves as being human and being part of this crazy, weird reality. So yeah, that was my set.
I like the choices. My runners up are "You Are My Best Friend" by Queen.
Oh yeah, so good.
Tegan and Sarah's song 19. I don't know. I don't know if that really.
I don't know that one. How does that one?
It's a great song. You probably haven't heard it, but I love it. It is basically about looking back to when you're 19 and you fell in love with someone and you had sort of this young lust love thing, and it's just like, I feel you in my legs before I ever met you, that kind of thing.
Okay.
And then we broke up, kind of a thing. But it's not really to the assignment, but I just wanted to talk about
Sure.
I Love You Just the way you are. And also, I also thought that Don't Think Twice by Bob Dylan is
my gosh, that song, I should have included that. I'm now kicking myself.
Yeah. By the way, have you seen the movie?
Not yet.
It's good.
But I'm making my way through the Oscar movies. I've seen Anora. I've seen
Did you like
Substance.
Anora?
Oh, I did. I liked the first half a lot better than the second half.
Man, I thought Anora was a masterpiece.
Okay, I really enjoyed it. I just thought that there was a lot of funny stuff the first half. The second half was a lot more serious. But
Yeah.
But the Substance, I watched.
I haven't seen that. Stacy, because we watched movies together,
Yeah.
she knows that she will not want to watch that movie because of the way it's advertised in terms of the graphic nature. Like, it'll give her nightmares.
I could see that. If you're not into those kind of things, if you don't like The Fly, stay the fuck away from this.
Right, exactly, yeah.
I loved it. Yeah. Anyways, I watched several, but I'm making my way through. I'm definitely intending to see that one. But what I was going to say is, like,
I would see it in the theater too, because, it's music and all.
I'm kicking myself because that song, Don't Think Twice, again, it's in the vein of these, like, imperfect relationships, and like the dirt and the grime.
Right.
And I love it. So
I mean, it's not, it's hard, when I listen to that song or sing that song, I will vacillate between two different positions. On one hand, in the literal sense, that song is about a drifter who doesn't ever get tied down, and he likes to hook up with this woman in this one particular town as he's this traveling minstrel, singer-songwriter, and he's got other women in other towns, and she's good enough for that town, and he waltzes in, and if she wants to hang out, fine, and if she doesn't, fine. He's good either way. He'd like to spend time with her, but he's not going to sweat it if she doesn't want to, and he's out of town. The other perspective,
that's the surface, yeah.
the other perspective, the read between the lines is that he deeply cares.
Oh yes,
but he is just telling himself this or her this to cope with the vulnerability.
And it's both, to your point, because he will have to move on with that perspective.
Yeah.
But it's like, I ain't saying you treated me unkind. You could have done better, but I don't mind.
Yeah.
You just kind of wasted my precious time. But don't think twice. It's all right.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
And the guitar is so nice. Oh, God,
Yeah.
I love that song.
But my number one would be The Luckiest by Ben Folds.
I don't know that.
So I'll just tell you the lyrics.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm guessing you've heard this song. But the lyrics are, I won't sing it, but it's a beautiful song. Very fragile. Ben Folds usually has pretty big productions, and especially back when he was writing this sort of music. But this song's very fragile and quiet and intimate. Anyway, he says, and by the way, he wrote this during his fourth marriage, and I think he's been divorced 5 times now.
Oh, okay.
But he says, I don't get it. I don't get it. Many things. I don't get many things right the first time. In fact, I am told that a lot. Now I know all the wrong turns, the stumbles and falls brought me here. And where was I before the day that I first saw your lovely face? Now I see it every day. And I know that I am the luckiest. What if I'd been born 50 years before you in a house on a street where you lived? Maybe I'd be outside as you passed on your bike. Would I know? And in a white sea of eyes, I see one pair that I recognize, and I know that I am the luckiest. I love you more than I have ever found a way to say to you. Next door, there's an old man who lived to his 90s and one day passed away in his sleep. And his wife, she stayed for a couple of days and passed away. I'm sorry, I know that's a strange way to tell you that I know that we belong, and I know that I am the luckiest. So, and there's other lyrics too. But
wow, but that's intense. Yeah. And it's got some of those elements we were talking about. It's the Up movie, Like, I like that. That's I think what attracted me so much to both When I'm 64, Grow Old With Me, some of those lyrics.
You clearly had kind of a little mini theme in those, yeah.
Yeah, it's like if you were grouping them, Billy Joel's, both of his songs were 2 different perspectives on you are definitely not perfect, and that's totally cool with me. And then the John Lennon and the Paul McCartney songs were two different, very different prisms of the same kind of grow old with me thing. And then, of course, then I had a couple randomos. But I like this because Ben Folds has really interesting songs. I'm not as familiar as I should be. I'm now going to go listen to that song because I want to.
Yeah, I'm guessing you've heard it. It was one of his hits. All right, let's take a break. We get back. More emails. What do you say?
Let's do it.
All right, we're back from the break. This next email is kind of interesting. It's from annual long-term middle-tier patron Alex from Portland. Good old Alex from Portland. He says, Dear Kirk and Berto, after much consideration, I have come upon my version of the shopping cart alignment chart. So just chiming in.
What?
The alignment chart is in reference to the Dungeons and Dragons alignment chart that Gary Gygax developed, I believe.
And what's the shopping cart?
You know, like lawful neutral and chaotic evil and all that stuff. Well, so for all the 9 quadrants, if you will, for the 9 different alignments, you know, how does that person deal with the shopping cart, returning it after going to the car?
Oh, I see what we're talking about. Okay.
So I will, Berto, I'll tell you the alignment and a description of the alignment, and then you tell me what that person would do, and then I'll say what middle tier patron Alex proposes. So lawful good, we'll start there.
Okay.
These are the paladins. These are the goody two-shoes. They follow the rules, and they uphold justice, and they're very good people.
Yes.
So what would they do with the cart?
Right.
And remember, there are other types of good.
Right.
So it's not just necessarily just return it, but there's something lawful good about it.
That's right. Okay. So first of all, they would scan the area and see who is the most needy person in that moment that needs a shopping cart, and they would rush to their aid and hand the shopping cart to them, while at the same time putting away the shopping carts that the others left around.
That's excellent. That's exactly what Alex said, essentially. So ding, ding, ding there. All right, neutral good. So these are very good people that are neither lawful nor chaotic.
Okay.
They do the right thing regardless of whether it's a law or tradition or has to do with the fun of chaos or anything, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So they're just sort of generic good.
Yep.
What would they do with the shopping cart?
Here's what would happen. This is a case where they don't actually have a shopping cart area outside in the parking lot, so it's kind of chaotic here. And what they do is they take time to grab the shopping carts in the area and line them up and put them in a nice little neat pile.
Okay, I like it. What Alex says is that they push their cart all the way back to the grocery store cart return, not the island.
So they don't put it in the parking lot. They take it inside to the
Right. Chaotic good, also very good. They act on personal morals, not necessarily in alignment with any sort of rules or law or tradition. It's just their own feelings about things. What would they do with the cart?
Oh, that's an interesting one. I think so. They just unloaded the cart stuff into their trunk, and they're sitting there with the cart.
Also, as a flavor, these individuals are often associated with people like Robin Hood is often considered the quintessential chaotic good person. You know what I mean?
Oh, well, in that case, okay, I wasn't going to go this way, but in that case, after they've unloaded their own groceries into their trunk, they look around and they start making a judgment call on who's got too much stuff in their carts, and then they put some of it in their cart and they go distribute it to the poor. Maybe. But at the very least, I was thinking that what they would do is instead of taking the cart back to either the inside or the outside thing, they would decide that the right thing to do is to put the cart next to a car that's parking.
Okay, well, that's pretty close to what Alex said. Alex said that they give their cart to someone experiencing homelessness.
Okay.
So you don't bring it back to the store because you don't give a fuck about convention or tradition or the rules. You give it to the person who needs it the most.
I see, because the homeless, meaning, here, take this, have it.
Yeah.
Which is definitely not quote unquote legal, but it's good in their rules.
That's
that makes sense.
Okay, lawful neutral. These individuals are not good nor evil, but they're not evil, but they're not good.
Right.
They value structure and law primarily above any other guidance system. So what would they do?
They would literally just like look to the nearest parking lot based cart holder and slide it in and be on their way.
What would they do if they found someone else having left a cart near their car and weren't intending on returning it?
I don't think they would go out of their way to deal with it, because they'd be like, that's their problem.
They're pretty anal about the rules, though.
They are?
Yeah.
Well, then they would go tell the store employee, but they wouldn't fix it.
Okay. Well, what Alex says is that they would ding the person's car with the cart, and then they would turn the cart.
I don't know if they would. Okay, I disagree with that, because that feels a little more not neutral. But at the very least, I don't think they would return the cart. I would just think they would do something passive aggressive. Maybe the ding is the thing.
But that's pretty lawful neutral in that they're not evil. They're not going out of their way to just punish someone because they like it, or they're not necessarily self-interested in this action. They're really about the law, but they're also not good. So they don't mind like right in front of you, just like dinging your car because you're not following the rules. God damn it!
I know, but then you're breaking a law because you're kind of
okay. Okay, true neutral. These individuals are not good. They're not evil. They're not lawful. They're not chaotic. They are considered to be a balance between everything, and they, given the situation, might be swayed in any direction, not necessarily not any of the directions, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
So they could act good under some circumstances. They could act evil. They're not necessarily particularly self-interested, more than the very average person. So what would the true neutral person do?
Well, so they were walking into the store. They were going to grab a cart, and they were going to go grocery shopping, but they noticed someone had left an unattended cart with some items that they needed. So they were like, looked around. No one was claiming it. So they just grabbed a couple of the items and went back to their car and left.
Okay. So what Alex says is they return their cart to the parking lot cart return. They observe a passing squirrel and appreciate its distinction from the human notions of morality. That's kind of okay. So chaotic neutral, again, not good, not evil, but the opposite of law. So they actually kind of not like the law.
Yeah.
So what would they do?
They would, first of all, do this thing where like they pop open their trunk, but at a distance, and they're blocking traffic. People are trying to park. They're starting to honk, but they're like doing little baskets with the stuff into their trunk. And when they're done, they just shoot the cart into the street to see if they can hit a car and then leave.
Alex says, returns their cart to the parking lot cart return, calls the person who dinged their car and tells them it's no big deal. So I guess there's multiple people in the... All right, lawful evil. These people are evil. They're very self-centered, very self-interested, but they are very much about following a code.
Right.
The quintessential example is a mob individual.
I was going to go this direction, Yeah, so what happens is that this person observes, and as soon as people are coming back with their carts, they lie to them and say, hey, we have a new policy. It actually costs money if you're using the carts. So it's $1 per, right? And he starts collecting money from everyone. And if they don't pay up, that's when he grabs the carts and slams them into their cars.
Okay. Well, in Alex's world, all of these individuals are in the same parking lot, and he says that the lawful evil person reports the person experiencing houselessness for possession of stolen property.
Oh, okay. I could see that.
Neutral evil, neither lawful nor chaotic, or could lean either way. What would they do?
They are coming back to the parking lot with stolen goods, first of all, and they are in their cart, and they see, they basically see a trunk open that someone is loading with stuff. They slam the trunk on the person's head, take those groceries too, and then put them in their own trunk and leave.
It's in the category. Alex says that they leave their cart in the middle of the goddamn parking lot. All right, last but not least, chaotic evil. These individuals are evil and unpredictable. What would they do?
Okay, they have lined all of the carts at this place with some horrible substance, like maybe some anthrax or something, and they have set up a little shop just along the way that claims to cure the anthrax, but it actually makes things worse. And so all the people get sick, they come to try to get help, and then they get worse, and he watches and laughs.
That's good. Well, what Alex says is that he dings someone's car with their shopping cart, doesn't return it, and then laughs about it when falling asleep that night.
Yeah, his is a little tamer for sure.
A little less
I love these, though.
elaborate.
It's
Yeah,
fun.
yeah. So, Berto, there are some short little emails that are directly at you.
Ooh.
So, coming right at your face.
Come at my face.
I want to come at your face with this question, which has to do with the following. Annual patron Thomas from Durham, he says, I'm listening to the Elon Musk deep dive right now. As a Spanish speaker, I want Berto's thoughts on the phrase pedo guy. My wife and I chuckle every time we hear that because pedo means what?
Fart.
Okay. So what do you think
Pedo
about
guy.
that, Berto?
Yeah, actually, this is funny that they bring this up. When I was a kid, there are a lot of phrases like this where it has a different meaning in Spanish than the thing. For example, in Shogun, the love interest is marico. But in Spanish, marica was a gay guy. So, and it was a pejorative, we were very unenlightened. So it was a bad word, basically. And so when I watched Shogun on
Does
TV.
it literally mean something in Spanish?
It's a good question. I don't know.
Okay.
But when I watched Shogun, I was always like embarrassed and kind of giggling when they would say the marico, so stuff like that. And yes.
Or Nova, the car that was being marketed in Mexico, and Nova in Spanish, right, means no go, right? Doesn't it mean no go?
Nova. Yeah, Nova. Oh, so the car doesn't go. I see. Yes.
Yeah.
I could see that. So pedo, absolutely, is fart. It's like what you call a fart. So as a kid, I remember when I started learning the word pedo, because it's in Spanish too, pedophilia. That is a word in Spanish. But I always, it almost made the word even grosser than it is, if that's possible. Because I not only associated it with like, kid diddling or whatever, but it was also like fart related. So it like made it extra bad.
Ew.
Yeah.
So in your sexy Spanish voice, which we used to do all the time, if you were to address annual patron Thomas from Durham, North Carolina, I believe, about pedo, what would that sound like?
Desde hace muchos tiempos, yo puse cuidado. Te he visto en la distancia, te he admirado, pero siempre he sabido que somos personas pedo de verdad.
I have no idea what you said.
Machos pedo.
All right. Patron Victoria from Argentina, she says, this is a bit of a niche question, but I'm sure there are many Spanish speakers out there listening. I can't seem to find the translation for the word shame. Dictionaries show vergüenza,
Sí.
humiliación, and remordimiento.
Remordimiento.
However, they don't really fit for different reasons. Is that true, Berto?
I would say vergüenza is the closest. So remordimiento that's remorse. Like, don't you have any remorse? No tienes remordimiento.
It's very different from shame.
It's very different. The second one she said was what?
Humiliation.
Sí. Humillación. You can be humiliated and feel shame. That's true. But vergüenza is shame.
Okay.
So like, sinvergüenza, when you call someone a sinvergüenza, let's say you're grabbing your shopping cart and you're slamming it into my car and then driving off because you're a chaotic evil or something. I'm like, sinvergüenza, which means don't you have any shame? But it's a word to call someone.
Okay.
So that is not only the closest.
Well,
I do think it's shame.
I'm wondering if what Victoria is referring to is one of the subsets of definitions of shame, which is increasingly talked about, which is a reference to the feeling of self-reproachment or self-hatred or putting yourself down. Like I was like, oh, I feel ashamed of myself, when you probably shouldn't feel ashamed of yourself.
I do think it's in there. Maybe it's because you would say things like, ¿No te da vergüenza? Don't you feel shame? Like, don't.
But would someone write in their journal, I have a problem with feeling too much shame, too much vergüenza?
I don't know. But let me think. So I'm a kid.
An adult.
Something. I'm just thinking. Like I'm a kid. I did something at school. It's embarrassing. So I come home and I'm like, qué vergüenza. I do think so.
Okay.
I think so. It's just, I don't know.
Would you describe someone in Spanish who
oso is another one. In at least in Colombia, oso was like, but it's more like how embarrassing. Cringe. Yeah.
But would you say that vergüenza is the word that you would use for being ashamed of your body when you
Yes.
shouldn't be ashamed of your body?
Yeah. In fact, there is an association with like if you're naked, like qué vergüenza.
Okay.
What a shame.
I know, but you know what I'm saying, right? Like where you're not naked, you're just at home.
Yeah.
Stepping into the shower and you, even though you have no reason to be ashamed of your body, you feel shame of your body.
I still think it fits. I mean, I don't know that someone literally would go like, oh, qué vergüenza, but maybe.
What would they say? What would they say?
If they said anything, it would be qué vergüenza.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, maybe that's what Victoria's talking about. It's like, well, or there isn't a word which is possible. There might, there's plenty
I don't know. Cause like you also don't do that in English, right? You don't go like, oh, what a shame. Like how shameful.
No, not that phrase, but they would say, I have body shame, literally fat shame, body shame. I'm ashamed of my body. And I shouldn't feel ashamed of my body.
Avergonzado. Tiene que avergonzarse. But there's a lot of uses of like you need to make someone shamed for what they did. You need to.
That's what I'm saying. There's in the English thing, or in our contemporary English American usage of the term shame today, it has a number of different overlapping but disparate usages. The ones you're saying, which are very much in line with vergüenza, but it seems like there's a nuance to the word shame in American English that you might not have a word for, which is possible. There are things that I know that they have words for, like in Japan and Germany, that in English we just don't have a word for. That doesn't mean that we can't communicate those ideas. It just means we don't have like one word for it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's possible. To me, though, like the one that fits the bill is vergüenza.
Well, I spent some time looking at all the different words, which I'm going to ask you about.
Okay.
But continuing with Victoria's email, this makes me wonder how languages affect our therapy process. Since I can't tell shame is since I can't tell shame is probably a very common word in English therapy sessions, huh? I don't know. I guess in Spanish, a word similarly used in therapy would be culpa, which really means guilt.
No. Vergüenza would be in every therapy session. Like, because that was like the other thing. Growing up Catholic, it was perennial shame. It's like the ultimate shame. You've sinned against God. What shame?
Okay.
Que vergüenza.
She finishes with, love the podcast. Abrazo. What's that?
Hug.
Oh, okay. So the words that I found, which I wonder, you tell me, Berto, that are also on this, in this area. De honra. Deshonra?
Deshonor.
Okay.
Deshonor is dishonor.
Yeah.
And it's like, that would be a little more like hardcore, like you've brought dishonor to the family. Has traído deshonor a la familia.
Okay. Pudor.
Pudor is a word that I would have learned briefly as a 15-year-old that I probably didn't use enough. But I don't know exactly what the right use is. Something that Gabriel Garcia Marquez would have written.
I think it's related to like prudence.
Supposed to read.
Like modesty.
Yeah, probably.
And
Pudor.
having shame regarding maybe specifically how much skin you're showing or what you're doing in public. Bochorno.
Bochorno. Ooh, que bochorno. Well, what's funny is, in Colombia, bochorno had a few meanings. One of them was actually when it's very hot, you say, está haciendo bochorno, which means it's literally like very hot.
Okay.
But you
So
could
you're
also say,
blushing.
Yeah, but I mean, like if the temperature's hot, like
Right,
oh my
right.
god, it's bochorno. Yeah. The other one would be if there's a lot of like a loud noise, like a big alborotado. If there's a big commotion, that'd be un bochorno potentially. So it might be embarrassing, but
You've never heard it used that way?
certainly not like oh siento tanto bochorno. No.
Okay. Estar apenado.
Apenado, sí. I am embarrassed. I am embarrassed. Oh, qué pena. Now, pena is possible because you use pena all the times. Oh, qué pena. Con permiso. Ay, qué pena. Like if you're going to ask for something, you literally say sumimasen in Japanese. It's the same thing in Spanish. You say, qué pena. ¿Me regalas el esfero?
Okay.
Like, I'm sorry. It's not, I'm sorry. It's,
Is this an Argentina-Colombia thing at all?
oh, I don't know if in Argentina is the same, but in Colombia, you would certainly say que pena a lot. Like, so
How similar are the word usages across those two
they're
countries?
pretty close. Like my friend Carlos and I, when we speak, it's pretty close. But there are little, just like with Mexico, there's slang terms that you're like, oh, really? That means that?
Well, I would imagine Mexico would be more different because it's further away from Colombia.
Yeah. Well, Argentina is quite a ways.
Yeah.
Quite a ways.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's actually, I'm not even sure if Mexico is farther than Argentina. Now that I think about it.
Yeah, I guess now that Brazil is goddamn huge.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay. In English, I will say that we use shame in a lot of different ways. So I gave it some thought on that level. And I've run into this before where I will talk about in some contexts, I will say that shame isn't always a bad thing. And if I, for example, were to push a child down the stairs because I was angry at them and I happen to feel shame, I would not say that that's a bad thing.
Oh yeah, and you would not say vergüenza in that case. Like if I push a child down the stairs, I wouldn't say, "Oh," and like I feel shame that I did that, right? I don't think I would say, "Uy, qué vergüenza."
What would you say?
Oh man, that's a good question. What
Because
would
it's
I
not
say?
guilt and it's not necessarily remorse.
Well,
It's-
you would. Well, okay, but wait. When you're saying in English, let's picture this. I just pushed a child. Was it on purpose?
Yeah.
Okay, it was on purpose, and now I'm regretting it, so I feel shame.
Yeah, one could say as a part of this constellation of feelings, regret and remorse is there, but shame is a different experience than regret and guilt and
Okay.
remorse.
I mean, I might say.
I feel like so shame in this context often it depends on who's using the word is associated with like or a better analogy would be if I tend to push children down the stairs.
Yeah.
And at night I feel shame that I'm that way. And so-
Remordimiento. That's what you would feel then. Remordimiento, remorse.
yeah, but it's not really remorse. I might also be feeling remorse. So there might not be a word for this in Spanish.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay. In that case, it could be vergüenza.
Is there
I
a word
suppose.
close to
Could be vergüenza.
self-reproachment or self-judgment or self-hatred or
Yeah,
self...
no. You could feel vergüenza at night. Like I could see that. Like, qué vergüenza. But it's just yeah.
Yeah. So I will say sometimes that shame as a feeling is sometimes very helpful to reorient our behavior and our dedication to things. There are moments when you can have very healthy, shameful feelings. Because the reason why I point this out is that I often will not trust experts who talk in absolutes. And so I want to be clear to people that this natural human tendency of shame has its usage. Now, 99.9% of the time, particularly in our contemporary society, if you're feeling shame, it probably is not only not warranted, but extremely destructive and based on a notion in our society that is based on capitalism or some sort of bigotry, for people to be ashamed that they're gay or people ashamed to be trans or ashamed that they're short or ashamed that they don't have enough money. Those are the outcome of systems of power that are extremely destructive, and no one deserves to feel any shame for those elements, for those I don't know what you call it, like for being those things. So I say all that because, like, one of the things that I will hear some experts in my field talk about is that all feelings are okay, or they'll say whenever someone is cheating, it's because of a good reason or something like this. And I don't like those kind of absolutes. And so part of that, I will sometimes say, look, shame, there are times here's, and I've said this this began with clients. A lot of what I say as a podcaster, it began with clients. So I would have clients that would be very ashamed of themselves for things that I thought they should not feel shame for.
Right.
And I would be advocating, sometimes fighting with them about the beliefs that were feeling their self-shame.
Right.
And they would be defending the reasons why they feel shame. And sometimes they would say, well, you're just saying that because you're a therapist and you just think that people shouldn't feel shame, and I get that. And I would say, no. I do believe people should be ashamed of themselves at times.
Right.
I'm not saying all shame is bad. I'm saying that feeling has its place.
Yeah.
If you have a tendency to push kids down the stairs, or you have a tendency to kill puppies and kittens, you should absolutely be fucking ashamed of yourself, my friend.
Right.
But what you're talking about is, according to beauty standards, you have evaluated that you're 7 pounds overweight and you feel ashamed of yourself. We can see the difference between what you should be ashamed of and what you are experiencing.
So it's in a way interesting. I feel like in Spanish, this concept of good shame might be even slightly more codified into the language itself, because so in English, you might say someone is shameless. But I don't know if you'd use it that, like someone just pushed someone down the escalator, like, you're shameless.
Oh, yeah, you would.
Maybe.
Yeah. I mean, shameless
maybe.
can be used in a situation. I mean, people don't tend to say that.
Right, but in Spanish, you would. You literally would say, sinvergüenza.
And are you referring to public shame?
Meaning that the thing you're criticizing is, have you no shame?
And how do you define shame in that context?
That you should have some shame for doing something so horrible.
You're defining shame by telling me it's shame.
No, that you should have shame for doing something so horrible. Meaning,
I know. Define shame without using the word shame.
Oh, well, okay. That you feel that socially you have broken some terrible contract.
Right. That's
yeah.
So that's a type of. So let me go over what I would.
Oh, but sorry, but just to close that thought, what I was trying to say is that in Spanish, it's expected that you should have shame.
Yeah.
Let alone that in some cases it's good.
Yeah, I think in English it's not the go-to kind of thing that one would say, but people will say. We would also use shameless in a more mundane or less toxic situation where someone would, for example, dress in a avant-garde way at the supermarket,
right?
And you'd say, "Wow!" So you wouldn't be putting them down. You'd be like, "Wow, that person's just shameless."
You wouldn't. But there's no a shameless isn't a person. Like you're not like, oh, that's a shameless. It's not a category of person. A person might be shameless, but they're not. Whereas sinvergüenza is a category of person.
Okay.
It's like asshole.
Okay.
Yeah, that guy's an asshole.
Interesting. Yeah. So the words that overlap and sometimes are used as synonyms and are confused, and I always advocate for just using a lot of words, which makes sense because these podcasts are always so long, is the concept of guilt. People will say that guilt and shame are different, and it depends on the context, depends on how we're using it, and in terms of the strict definitions, particularly today, guilt is different in that if we're contrasting it with shame, we're referring to the experience of feeling responsible for a wrongdoing, like a specific wrongdoing, like a discrete event that we feel guilty for. We might feel guilty for something that we did on purpose or something we didn't do on purpose.
Right. But whereas you wouldn't say you're feeling body guilt.
Or shame.
But you would say body shame, but you wouldn't say body guilt.
But if I, for example, were to show up late to take you to the airport, I might feel guilt about letting you down or about causing you problems. I might also feel shame
Yeah, totally.
for not putting in the effort to make sure I was there on time, which might be fair to me or not fair to me, depending. Anyway, and I think shame. I keep coming back to this word of self-hatred, like I'm a bad person because I did this, and with the puppies and the pushing the kids down the stairs, might you benefit from actually asking yourself, am I a good or bad person? Maybe I'm a bad person. Maybe a part of me is bad, and I need to change that. Whereas the vast majority of the same feeling of I'm a bad person in our contemporary society is not justified. That's anyway. Another feeling is embarrassment. We've already been over that. Another feeling, which is very much akin to embarrassment, is mortification. Feeling mortified. It's a bit different, right? Yeah. We tend to use that in a different...
And you have that in Spanish. Mortificado is a word.
Okay. I guess I would define that as different from embarrassment as a more intense form that also kind of involves that cringe and maybe a little shame. Maybe that feeling, that itch of shame in mortification.
Yeah.
Self-reproach, as I was saying, blaming oneself, like, oh, you dummy, I can't believe you did that. Like when I pogoed off my head, like as I was literally in the split second I was pogoing off my head, I was reproaching myself, if that's grammatically correct. Humiliation, disgrace, right? That's kind of different. It's like reputation and honor.
Desgracia. And in fact, actually, that's funny because there's another type of person called desgraciado. So that's an interesting one because desgracia
is like a disgrace.
Well, yeah, desgracia is something terrible that's happened. Un desgraciado is someone that's just done terrible things.
Okay. Remorse, which we've talked about. This is a deep, lingering regret from something you did in the past. And then we have the word regret, which is maybe a broader term than remorse. And one can regret something without feeling remorse, right? You can regret not investing in a company or something. And other words for feeling like I'm a bad person, like I've already said, self-blame, self-condemnation, worthlessness, self-loathing, so it's a lot of self-attack, if you will. So I don't know. All right, one more question about language, Berto. Annual patron Katie from the Czech Republic, she says, "Hi, Kirk and Berto. For a while, I've been wondering about language and personality. My native language is Czech, but I've been learning English at school since I was about 8. At about 14, I really fell in love with the language and studied it more even outside of school." Sounds like studying English, right? I fell in love with English. "I often feel much more comfortable expressing myself in English, especially on the topics concerning my mind and emotions. In therapy, I can open up more easily in English." Just chiming in, Berto, what do you think about that?
Okay, so what's funny, I first learned Spanish, but quickly I started learning English. So like when I was 1.5 or 2 at the most is when I started learning English. So I don't have a memory of a time in my life where I didn't know both languages, which is interesting, right? Like imagine, you know a little. What? You know a little Spanish, a little, a little bit.
Yeah. I mean...
And did you take a language in high school or something?
French.
Yeah. So you remember when you started learning that.
Yeah.
But imagine not remembering when you started learning either language. Of course, you don't remember learning English because...
Yeah, that's got to be weird.
Right.
It's like your foundation of language is in two different...
It's both.
Yeah.
But I had this like seesaw effect where for the first few years, I actually became more English speaking because I was spending time in the States. So when I came back to Colombia, I would say a lot of words in English and I had to kind of like relearn Spanish a bit And so I probably thought.
Did your parents speak to you in English at home?
No, but I spoke so much English everywhere else that, Okay, and then it was the opposite, right? I spent so much time speaking Spanish that when I moved up here, well, actually when I came to visit, I was like English was more of a second language, but still I knew it well enough. And then when I went back to visit after years of being here as an adult, I struggled at first speaking Spanish, even though I technically knew fluent.
How's your accent in Colombia?
I have way more accent in Spanish than I do in English. And nowadays, much less. But like in 1996, I went back and they were like, dude, what happened to you? Gringo, what's going on?
Like with your accent?
With my accent, yeah. They were just like, what the hell? Nowadays.
Like what would be a word that you would say?
I don't know if I can fake it, but it'd be like, hola, ¿cómo estás? You know, like in that direction.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe not that extreme. It's the kind of thing where I wasn't quite as aware, but all my relatives were like, oh my God, dude.
Yeah.
Nowadays, it's not as much. Like I've spent enough time going there now that, you know. But what I was getting at was that the way I think, because, you know, which language do you think in?
Yeah.
It takes me probably 2 to 3 weeks to start thinking in Spanish when I'm down there, which is interesting.
What does that mean?
Like, you know, when you're having self conversations in your head, like the inner dialogue, it's usually in English until I've been there for like 2 or 3 weeks. And then it's not only in Spanish, but starts being partially in Spanish.
Yeah. What about in therapy and stuff? Could you imagine?
So in therapy, I would find it very hard in Spanish because now I might be surprised, but my sense is that it'd be hard because Spanish takes me extra cognitive effort.
Right.
Because I at best, I have a 15-year-old's vocabulary. At best, that's assuming I remembered everything, right? Now, obviously, when we're there socially, it's like mostly I'm just using normal words like pásame el azúcar, you know, like. But if I'm in therapy and I'm trying to talk about deep emotional things, man, I don't know. I think I might be working uphill.
Yeah. So that's different from Katie because Katie's talking about essentially saying from your perspective that it's actually easier for her to do therapy in Spanish. You know what I mean? Or more specifically, if I were better at French, if I were better at French, then therapy. So I don't know.
It'd be an interesting experiment.
Yeah.
I wonder if I could try going to a therapy session in Colombia.
So, Katie, I don't know. And I don't know if this is an hypothesis worth exploring, but it's possible that you, in learning English, might have learned a lot of language and maybe even vibe around therapy and self-reflection that is not common in the Czech conversations that you're having. Or because it's a foreign language, it feels like a secret place for you to explore things. I mean, not, you know, I'm sure a lot of your friends and family also speak some English, if not a lot, but it could be like, well, it's another, you know, if I go back to, you know, like I could see a scenario where Czech is associated with like childhood and my culture and things that I feel like are holding me back.
Oh, interesting.
And although speaking English, you know, being in an English-speaking country doesn't free you from these things, but to her, it's outside of all of those worlds. You know, it's a completely other thing, right? And the associations, like, I don't know if you tell me if you experience this, Pedo, but if she were to say a word like family, for example, in both languages, it probably feels different, even though it means the same thing because of all the associations.
That's a really fascinating thing, in that I'm sort of thinking what unexpected things might open up in my reverse case of if I actually tried therapy in Spanish, because that's the language where I was younger, right?
Well, answer me this. So words like family, depression, anxiety, self-awareness, emotion, relationship, love, they have counterparts, Spanish and English, but do they fundamentally feel different possibly because of when you learned and were using those words primarily?
I think some of them would. Like, for example, amigo. Amigo means friend. But immediately, if I say the word amigo, I'm going to be picturing a younger self of me in Colombia with those amigos, even though I'm also picturing you guys here too. But I think it might trigger different aspects of my psyche that I wouldn't have been as aware.
Well, specifically, it's it's gendered as well.
It's gendered. That's true. That's true. Another example would be like if I say Navidad, means something completely different in my head than if I say Christmas.
Right.
Christmas, I can picture it here. My mom, my dad. If I say Navidad, I'm picturing all these Colombian things.
Yeah, that one makes sense.
Right?
It'd be hard to not have it do that. But like words like family or like friend,
Familia,
these are words that you don't say.
Well, but then there's other obvious things. Like up here, I might be talking to my therapist and say, oh, my uncle, right? And I know what that means. I know who my uncles are. But it's still, I feel like it's still a different feeling if I say tío. Because that's what I call him.
How's it different? How's it?
It's like, and you know, I'm guessing because I haven't experienced going through the therapy, but I'm just like, when I say tío, it's not just a secondhand reference to the thing. It's the direct thing, the direct way I call the thing.
Right.
That's tío. I literally say tío.
It's both a universal descriptor of your parent's brother, but it's also
his name basically
infused in all the experiences.
Yeah. And so when I'm here, I'm like, well, I have an uncle that, it's like, it's removed a little bit.
Yeah.
Whereas if I'm like tío, like mi tío, that's like, yeah, that's interesting.
Going on with email. What's Berto's experience with being bilingual? Does he prefer one language over the other in certain situations or for certain topics? Is it only about the people he's with so that they could understand each other? End of email from annual patron Katie from the Czech Republic.
Yeah, definitely. First of all, I'm because of how many years now, I'm definitely most comfortable in English because that's my language for the majority of my life. That said, if I'm in Colombia, even though most of those people speak English, I'm way more comfortable speaking Spanish. It just feels like I'm at home and I like it. Even if I get stuck a little bit with certain words, I still prefer it. It feels right. It feels like I'm home. For any technical topics, I don't love speaking Spanish because I've tried it too. Because like I've gone to a work office down there and I tried to have, and oh my gosh, I feel so out of my element because there's just like a lot of words that I've never had to learn as a kid.
Yeah, that's interesting. The technical words probably have very specific translations that wouldn't be intuitive to you.
Right. And even, I say technical, but even words about like the kind of words you'd have in a workplace that a 15-year-old, also a 50-year-old 30 years ago wouldn't have had to deal with at all. Right.
Yeah.
So if I'm sitting there and it's like, you know, in English, we might have like, hey, let's have a little conference to figure out what our strategy is going to be like. Like all that would feel so foreign to me in Spanish.
Maybe that's another element for Katie is that for whatever reason in therapy, maybe her therapist primarily speaks English and
could be
she just because she's bilingual, she just
right.
leaned into the English, and over time it becomes a much more elaborate and comfortable space in the same way that maybe sitting in a particular way would,
right.
because it's just what you're used to, you know, like if you were to be asked to do therapy while standing on your head and you've never done that before, maybe it's just a little, it's just like, well, this is weird, even though it's not directly related to what I'm communicating. It's just like, it's just uncomfortable. And so maybe there's that, because I am wondering, she's like, I'm often more comfortable expressing myself in English. And, you know, I don't know what's going on in the Czech Republic. I'm sure there's a lot of therapists who speak Czech, but I also wonder if there might be an overrepresentation of primarily English speaking, or at least also English speaking therapists in the Czech. I don't know.
You know, there's other little things that I, not a lot, but a few that I learned when I was so little that they still actually feel more comfortable in Spanish. The months of the year.
Oh, really?
So, you know,
because that would be really drilled into your head.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, so, you know, the finger thing with your knuckles.
And it wouldn't be drilled in when you're preschool, which is when you were in the States.
That's right.
Yeah.
So with the knuckles, you can figure out if it's 30 or 31 days.
Yeah.
But I can't go January, February. I have to go enero, febrero, marzo, abril, mayo. Like, it's just a weird.
What about the alphabet?
Thing.
I mean, I guess you learned that preschool.
Both, yeah. In fact, actually, I struggle with the Spanish alphabet because they have extra letters.
What about
A, B, C, Che?
What about words that you use with
Eye.
children when they go poop and pee? Because in Japanese American households, we would use
Poopies.
we would say shishi, which I think goes way back, like to the 1800s or something.
For me, I found it more with like mnemonic type stuff, like remembering little rules about and stuff I would have learned as a younger kid, number stuff, spelling things. I don't know, stuff.
What
like
about
that.
like sex things? Because you were
That's interesting.
pre-15, going through puberty in Colombia, so.
Well, one interesting thing is that there seem to be more sex terms in Spanish than there were in English. Like I'm probably wrong about this, but it just felt like in English it was like, hey, penis, vagina, I guess dick or whatever. But it was just like, it's like a limited vocabulary. And in Spanish you have a host of words.
I think I wouldn't be surprised if there's a lot of words in Spanish, but I could probably rattle off 100
I guess so.
actually used terms for both penis and vagina.
So maybe that's the example, is that I am more familiar with the variety at the age that I learned first about these things.
Yeah, okay.
Not that I don't know the words in English. I'm sure if you list them, I'm like, well, yeah. But I'm just like, immediately when it comes to mind, I would start probably thinking more of Spanish words.
Well, let's do it. Let's go back and forth between English and Spanish for the slang words for penis. I will start. Johnson.
Verga.
Rod.
Pipí.
Junk.
Chorizo.
Sausage.
Pene. Which is penne pasta. That's where penne pasta.
Okay. Noodle.
Salchicha.
Dipstick.
I don't know. Now I'm stumped.
Wiener. Stump.
Stump? No. Hopefully not. I don't know. Now I guess I'm.
Wang.
I mean, you would go through the range of like all the names of stuffed meats and use them as slang. So like morcilla would be one, mortadela would be one. Like
so people, you remember them using those
as like what do you call them? Euphemisms? Yes.
Yeah. Slang. Yeah.
But the main ones would be like verga would be like the more like cock. It's kind of like verga, and then pene would be more like clinical, and PP would be a little more childish.
Yeah. I'm going to take a guess and say that across language barriers, every 14-year-old has hundreds of terms, and you just remember the ones because you learned the Spanish ones.
Well, and it's not just about the terms with like how to say penis. It was really more like, and I think it was to your point, because when I started learning about sexuality, it was in Spanish for sure. I think I have like, it just feels like a rich world of terminology and ideas and stuff. Whereas in English, it feels a little more, which it's not clearly, but it just feels more confined to me. It's like, yeah, there's missionary, which obviously it's not real. It's just, that's how it feels.
Well, I wonder, because, you came up to the States formally when you were 15, which also has its, culture moving forward from that date with a lot of crass talk among people. But I wonder if for you, there's similar to what Katie's talking about, is that you would, even if you were hearing English words, you would frame it in a Spanish language system because you came into puberty.
Yeah, it's quite possible. And also there's
because
this
the vibe, you're saying like sexuality has a Spanish Latin vibe to you.
Yeah, and there's this other aspect which is weird that in the guy culture, so you know how here as teens, maybe even as young adults, like we might insult each other a bit, or we might call each other names and things like that. You might even say like, "Yo, you son of a bitch, come here, help me with this thing." But it's not to the extent that we do it in Spanish culture, at least.
Well, I was wondering about your friends that
so like basically
that you fell in with in Tacoma, if they just weren't oriented that way,
No, I mean, they were as crude as you can make them. But I guarantee you that in English, the range of insults and vocabulary used with each other is nowhere near as colorful. Like in Spanish, from the age of like 13 at least, you start calling each other like the most horrible things, but it's like the right way to call each other. So it'd be like, oiga, gran huevón, marica, hijo de puta, whatever.
This isn't the same thing, but is this related to why so many people that I know who speak Spanish, Mexicans and Colombians, will refer to someone that they love as gordo?
Oh, yeah, that's like the mild version. That's
what I'm saying. It's not like horrific, but
it'd be like, oye, marica, or like, hijo de puta. I mean, you're literally saying like...
But is the gordo thing in this camp? Because, Carlos and his wife, I was hanging out with them, and she was calling to him like, "Hey, babe," and she said, "Hey, gordo," and I was like, "Did you just call him fatso?"
It's a term of endearment.
They were kind of laughing about it.
It's a term of endearment. It's a little different. With the guys, it's like this. It's this proving ground of like we're now at an age where we can use all these words.
I get that, but
you wouldn't call each other gordo. That's the point.
I know, but is the gordo the culture that you're referring to?
I think it's a little different. The other one's more like a romantic term of endearment. Whereas this,
but there's also people that will nickname their kids gordo and their cousins gordo.
Yeah.
And when I ask people what that means, they're like, "Well, it means fatso," and I'm just like, "Oof."
Yeah, I don't know if you call, maybe in Mexico, I don't know if you comfortably call just some of your relatives gordo, but if you're in a romantic relationship, you definitely would.
And I don't know if I was told this, but I always thought that the United States has been on the cutting edge of fat shaming for decades, and so other countries don't, like when I watch 90 Day Fiance, one of the things that we'll get run into occasionally is their 90 Day Fiance, there's an American with someone from another country, and there are times when this cultural element will be illuminated where the person from the other country will call his fiance or his wife who's American, plump or bigger, and he likes it. That's why he's involved with her, is because he prefers that, and a lot of people prefer that in his circle. And he will say that she's big and fat or whatever, and he thinks he's at the very least just saying a neutral comment, and maybe even a really intense compliment. And she, given the American sense, will be extremely insulted, and a big fight will happen, and it's a culture clash. So sometimes I wonder if in Spanish-speaking countries, Latin countries, if gordo is what it is, but they have a just completely different idea about, or at least it's not as intense as the way it is in the States.
Yeah, that could be.
Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, so I don't know the original origin of the calling a loved one gordo. I guess that it has something to do with the fact that food is highly cherished in Latin culture. Number one. Number two, maybe there's an association with like once you have enough money and you're in a stable relationship, it is good to gain a little bit of weight, and so then it's like it's a term of endearment and a term of like gordo, gordito. Right?
But at the same time, you would say that when you would get off the plane in Colombia, your family would say, "Oh, you're fat now."
Yeah, and it was not a term of endearment. It was like
there's something wrong with you.
What the fuck happened to you?
Yeah,
exactly. So it's not. That's why I'm saying I don't think, at least in Colombia, you don't just go like calling everyone gordo. That's not the right thing.
So maybe the metropolitan Bogota has a similar sense of gordo as the States?
The other, maybe, yeah. The other weird thing is the thing I was saying about the insults, and I know it's similar here. Like, if you're comfortable with a guy friend, you might say like, "Hey, asshole." You wouldn't go to a random stranger on the street and say like, "Hey, asshole."
Right.
Same thing there, but it's like little, even more so maybe. I don't know. Like me and my friends still call each other huevón, blah, blah, blah. Like we still use these terms. You'll notice with Carlos, he does the same thing. And it's like not just Colombia. It's definitely Mexico. It's like pervasive.
What does he call you?
I mean, like when we were hanging out, he'd say like, "Oh, marica," or "huevón," or whatever. Like he'd use these terms.
Oh,
you know?
Really?
And they literally don't mean anything bad.
No.
It's just a term of endearment.
I don't think I knew that. That's funny because, Carlos would. I'm arguably closer to him than you are.
Yeah.
And he would never in English call me a bad name.
No. And I mean, I did.
So culturally, it's just a completely
different.
different.
And in high school, we did, right? Like, we'd be like, yo, asshole. I mean, you call each other stuff. But in Colombia, it was the norm constantly. Like, every interaction was...
Yeah.
Like, and you'd pile on the names.
Because,
like,
me and my friends that I grew up with and am still friends with, there's a similar ethic, but it is manifest differently. It's not what you're talking about. And me and my friends, pretty crass and cruel at times, particularly when we were teenagers, but it wasn't by calling each other those kinds of names.
But you might,
it would manifest. I'm trying to think. It would manifest in like nothing's coming to mind. But I know that we would have a similar kind of vibe of essentially saying that I guess it would be with really in-joke nicknames.
Okay, sure. But if you see someone, like, they arrived, you might have gone, at some point you might have gone like, hey, fucker, like, what's up,
Yeah.
Right?
But not as a rule.
Now, imagine that so you arrive, you come over to my house, I invited you, come over, like, hey, fucker, you're like, hi. Like, hey, fucker, do you want, and I just literally, every 5 minutes, I'm like, hey, fucker, do you want to start eating? You would be like, dude, what the fuck? Like, stop.
Yeah.
But that's what it was like. And it was just
even
like
for
saying
adults, guys.
Yes,
Okay.
It's just like saying dude or bro, brah.
And would each of your friends have a different bad word?
No, it was pretty consistent terminology.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It like I said, it's more like a pronoun. It's like hola huevón, like it's just a weird bonding. Like, yeah. But because of that, you tack that on, plus you learn, and then you have all these ways to describe what you're gonna do with the woman when you get with her that are very, like, colorful and things. Like,
well, I said, I imagine that if you grew up in the States, you would have the same number, but who knows? Maybe
I don't even know if it's number, right? It's more like, you're right, mileage will for sure vary. But I was a 15-year-old in high school, and my friends and I were as dirty as they come, and we were talking. There's this weird thing. I don't know. And I think I'm only proving your point that my brain got wired a certain way. And so maybe it just feels more natural because I was younger when I first wired it that way.
Or I could see a scenario where you're 14 and you're starting to learn ways of describing what you're going to do to your girlfriend.
Right.
And then you come to the States and you're fluent in English, but you haven't been having those locker room conversations. Right. And you start hearing them at 16, 17, and they feel more sterile and less oomph to them because, it's sort of old news by that point, and you understand the concept.
Right. Well, because there's even, that's right. Because there's even stuff like, you might say like, oh my gosh, look at that ass. Like, oh, right. Okay, that's fine. But in Spanish, it's like, uf, mira ese culo.
Well, when you put it that way.
I know. And there was just something, again, it's probably just my brain wiring.
Yeah, but so imagine me. So this is a sharp contrast.
Right.
I start learning Spanish.
Right.
And I learn that phrase.
Right.
And I say it with a pretty good accent.
Right.
You could imagine I wouldn't have the same, it wouldn't resonate with me.
Exactly.
And I wouldn't say it in the same way.
So to rewind all the way back to your original question, I think the answer is yes. Because I started learning about sexuality in Spanish at a younger age, I think a lot of my brain got a little more wired in that direction. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. So to answer annual patron Katie's question from the Czech Republic, what's Berto's experience of being bilingual is completely only within dirty words, insulting people, and commenting on girls' butts.
Yeah, pretty much.
And everyone out there, please take care of yourself because
lo mereces.